In a kingdom called Clace there lived a little boy named Noor with his mother. Unfortunately, Noor's mother is often sick, so Noor has to take care of their lives alone. However, that wasn't a problem for Noor. In fact, he is happy to be able to help his mother, even though her mother often feels guilty for taking away Noor's childhood, which should be filled with playing, not taking care of sick people. One night, when Noor brought food to her mother, she found her mother dead. Since that night, Noor has lived alone in this world. As a boy, Noor tries to stay strong and live his days as usual, gardening, hunting, taking care of livestock, and cleaning the house. However, eating alone felt very lonely for him. Noor looked for a book that his father often read to him. The book tells the story of an adventurer who defeats a giant dragon. From that story, Noor dreams of becoming an adventurer. He remembered his mother's last words telling him to live according to his wishes. Finally, Noor decided to pursue his dream of becoming an adventurer. He went far from home for the first time, even passing through the barrier that had been protecting his house. The next day, Noor arrived at the center of the Clace Kingdom city. He immediately asked the guard about the location of the Adventurers Guild office. However, when he arrived at the guild, it was nothing. Noor had been kicked out by the guild master because he was considered too small. Even so, Noor didn't give up. Feeling sorry, the guild master finally told Noor to go to an adventurer training school first. This training school is a place where people who want to become adventurers can get the necessary skills. Noor was very enthusiastic. He immediately registered and felt that being a swordsman who could defeat a dragon with one blow was very cool. Even though none of his friends are his age, Noor remains enthusiastic. 3 months later, everyone had gotten their respective skills, except Noor. He was still practicing as usual until finally he was told to stop by his teacher because he was deemed not to have the talent to be an adventurer. Even so, Noor didn't want to give up and asked for a little more time because he had already mastered the parry skill. He thought that soon he would get a new skill. However, Noor was still told to stop. Noor then decided to try another job, this time as a warrior. However, the result was the same, and he was expelled again. Eventually, Noor changed schools again, this time trying to become a hunter. Again, he only damaged the bow. He then moved to the next job as a cabbot, but still failed. After that, he tried to become a wizard, but after 3 months of studying, he could only make a small fire. Even his teacher was confused because he had never seen someone with such little talent. The last job Noor tried was to become a healer, but the result was still the same, he was thrown out again. Noor returned to the guild office to report, but because he didn't have any special skills, he was rejected and not allowed to register as an adventurer. Feeling sad, Noor finally returned to his parents' house, but he didn't want to give up. He is determined to continue practicing at home and try to register again when he is ready. Noor starts practicing alone at home. He made a wooden sword and constantly practiced the parry skills he learned at swordsman school. A year later, he still had not acquired any new skills, but his parrying ability had improved greatly. He can bounce 10 sticks at once. 3 years later, he was able to bounce 100 sticks, although he still had not acquired any new skills. However, Noor did not give up and continued to practice day and night, even until his wooden sword broke. 10 years later, with one slash, could bounce thousands of wounds, and the effects of the attack could even be felt for a radius of kilometers. Even so, he still hasn't gotten any new skills either. This time, Noor is confident that he will be accepted as an adventurer. When he arrived at the guild, the receptionist had changed into a woman. Noor was asked to fill out a form and write down the skills he had. However, because his skills were only passive skills, the woman told Noor to go back to training school. Noor, who had tried everything, was disappointed, but he still hoped for mercy. Suddenly, the guild master appeared, and even though he was confused, he still remembered Noor. After Noor explained the situation, the guild master still did not allow Noor to become an adventurer because the condition for registering to become ranky was that he had to have at least one special skill. Meanwhile, Noor only has passive skills that cannot be calculated. However, out of pity, the guild master told Noor that there was actually a rank below rank E, namely rank F. To become rank F, you don't need to have any skills, but you can only take missions that don't involve fighting monsters, so you can only do just odd jobs. Normal people are usually reluctant to become adventurers with such a job, but Noor is very enthusiastic. He really wants to become an adventurer even though he is only F rank. At least, he can fulfill his dream. Finally, the guild master had no reason to refuse anymore and made a member license for Noor, even though it was only F rank. Noor was very happy, and from that day on, he started his life as an adventurer. Noor does many trivial jobs, from lifting people's belongings to catching runaway cats. However, Noor didn't forget to keep practicing. He still hopes for a miracle. One day, Noor was cleaning the sewers and continuing his construction work. At that time, he heard someone's voice asking for help. When he came to the source of the sound, it turned out there was a very large minotaur monster. The soldiers appear to be protecting a princess whose powers are sealed. The captain tried to develop a strategy, but before he finished, he was killed first. Noor immediately went to the captain and found that he was dead, followed by other soldiers who were also dead one by one. The monster looks very strong and seems interested in the princess. However, when the monster was about to attack the princess, Noor threw a stone at the monster. Soon the monster turned to chase Noor. Noor deliberately did that, so that the princess had a chance to escape. When the monster was about to attack Noor, he managed to parry, making the monster turn around. However, the monster got up again and continued to attack Noor repeatedly. Noor continued to parry the monster's attacks, even though the monster's attacks were very heavy. The sword Noor was using was starting to crack, and Noor knew that if he was hit by that attack, he would definitely die immediately. However, Noor can only parry because he doesn't have the skills to attack. Noor manages to keep the monsters busy, but the princess hasn't escaped yet. Finally, the monster saw the princess and began to attack her again. Noor quickly ran and parried the monster's attack, until his sword broke. Even so, Noor persisted, because he couldn't bear to see the princess killed. With whatever sword he had, Noor managed to repel the monster's attack, until the monster's weapon bounced off and cut off his own head. The monster died and the seal on the princess's body disappeared. Noor, who was very tired, still couldn't believe that fighting a minotaur alone could be so tiring. He thought that he still needed a lot more practice. The princess thanks Noor and asks his name, but Noor replies that his name is not important, then leaves. Not long after, the princess's soldiers came to her. It seems that the princess is an important person. On the way home, Noor still felt shaky, so he thought that his training so far was still not enough and he had to train harder. Even so, Noor is already very strong. The soldiers immediately moved quickly to clean up the remains of the battle with the minotaur. Unfortunately, many of the prince's bodyguards were not rescued. Even though some of them acted recklessly, this incident was still very unfortunate. May they rest in peace there. By the way, the princess's name is Lin, a princess of this kingdom. However, because Noor comes from a remote place, he doesn't recognize who Lin really is. Meanwhile, a blonde girl named Ines is Lin's personal bodyguard. Ines felt very guilty towards Lin for not succeeding in protecting her. But actually, it wasn't entirely Ines' fault. Lin himself insisted on practicing alone. They didn't stay there long because they were immediately called home by Rin, Lin's older brother. Rin was thinking hard in his room, because according to reports, the minotaur was supposed to be on the deepest floor of the labyrinth, but suddenly appeared in the middle of the city. It's really strange, plus there are reports that the minotaur reacted to a ring worn by a traitor who was at the scene. In fact, the minotaur was a very powerful monster, and it was too luxurious for ordinary people to store the power of such a monster in a ring. This is clearly the work of rich people. After being traced, it turned out that the ring came from the Dirida's empire. Rin was convinced that Dirida's deliberately challenged the Clay Kingdom. According to Rin, Dirida's wanted to go to war with Clay because they wanted to plunder the relics in the labyrinth of this country. After discussing this, Rin's attention shifted to the person who saved Lin. Who was the person who could defeat the Minotaur with just one attack? Rin found it hard to believe that there was someone that strong, especially since no one knew his name. The next day, Noor shows up at the guild to report on yesterday's mission, but he is surprised to see the guild master making a fuss all by himself. The guild master is very grateful that Noor is still alive. The guild master tells him that there was an A-class monster attack that appeared near Noor during yesterday's mission, and Noor did not report anything after the mission was completed. The master thought Noor was dead. Noor apologizes and explains that he was followed by a group of people dressed strangely, so he went home because he was tired. The guild master also told that someone defeated the monster with just one attack. Noor was amazed to hear the story, even though he did it himself. Noor was grateful because he only met a cow and not the monster squad. The guild master then asked when Noor would look for a more decent job, but Noor was confused because he felt that his current life as an F-rank adventurer was enough. After that, Lin suddenly appeared. It turned out that Lin had intervened directly to look for Noor. The guild master was clearly immediately excited to see the princess come to the guild, especially since the one being sought was Noor. Everyone in the guild looked at her. Lin, who initially wanted to talk to Noor alone, felt uncomfortable and invited Noor to talk outside. Of course, Lin used a skill to hide their conversation from others. Noor just nodded, even though he was actually confused. After arriving at a deserted place, Lin thanked Noor for saving him yesterday and offered Noor a reward. Lin offered anything Noor wanted, be it treasure, territory, or anything else, but Noor refused. He was not interested in all that, and only wanted to be an adventurer. For Noor, just saying thank you was enough. Lin, as a member of the royal family, felt bad for someone like Noor who refused a large reward. Finally, Lin invited Noor to meet her father. Although Noor was reluctant at first, Lin insisted until she cried, so Noor finally agreed. They continued their journey to Lin's house. Noor, who was a country bumpkin, did not realize that he was in the royal palace. Even after meeting the king, Noor remained oblivious to the fact that Lin was a princess. After a brief introduction, the king thanks Noor for saving his daughter. Noor politely apologizes for coming in plain clothes, but the king doesn't mind. The king then offers Noor various rewards, from wealth, territory, to royal heirlooms, but Noor refuses them all. Noor just wants to go home and have a good rest. Finally, the king offered the legendary sword Chimera, and Noor agreed to accept it. However, when Noor tried to swing the sword, he felt that the sword was very heavy and valuable. The king lied and said that it was just an ordinary sword that he picked up while walking around. The innocent Noor believed the king's words. The king then asks Noor to train Lin, but Noor feels that she is just an ordinary person and is not worthy of teaching someone as great as Lin. Noor refuses by saying that parents should not interfere too much in their children's lives, making Ines upset because he feels that Noor is belittling the king. However, the king laughs because he is happy to meet an honest person like Noor. After his business was finished, Noor took his leave and went home. When Noor saw the sword given by the king, the first thing he thought was that the size of the sword was similar to the gutter he used to clean every day. Noor even planned to use the legendary sword to clean the gutter. Suddenly, Ines came and apologized for being so rude as to call Noor a weirdo. Noor, who didn't mind it, was confused as to why Ines was kneeling. Ines thanked Noor for saving Lin, explaining that her duty was to protect the royal family from all dangers. Ines also said that she was the vice captain of the main force and had the title of Shield of God since she was little, which made her Lin's personal bodyguard. Since Noor had saved Lin, Ines felt indebted to Noor. She offered to help Noor with anything she might need in the future. Noor simply accepted Ines' offer. However, when Ines heard Noor's name, she looked shocked and didn't give an answer when asked why. This made Noor feel strange, but he hoped it wasn't a big deal. Just as Ines left, Noor was stopped again by Gilbert, who from the start was curious about Noor's figure. He then challenged him into a mock battle. What a challenging life for Noor. Noor was confused. Where else are you taking me, he thought. Even though at first, Noor wanted to go straight home because he was really tired but to take care of this again. When he arrived, it turned out that Gil had taken Noor to the sparring room. Are you serious? Do you want to fight me? Noor asked in a doubtful tone. Gilbert just smiled and asked Noor not to cry if he lost. At first, Noor wasn't too interested, but he became curious. It had been a long time since he trained with someone else, so he wanted to test how strong he was. Who knows, he might get a special skill in this training. During the preparation for the fight, Noor was actually very nervous. Meanwhile, the audience was surprised because Gilbert, who was famous and considered the strongest, dared to challenge Noor. Gil attacked first with a very fast movement, but Noor was able to avoid it casually. Noor only avoided it because he was studying Gilbert's movements. Even though his movements were fast, for Noor, for some reason he saw Gilbert moving in slow motion. Noor felt that Gilbert was holding back because he felt sorry for him. Noor immediately asked for a timeout. Gil thought Noor would give up, but instead Noor told Gilbert not to hold back. Gilbert, who felt challenged, tried to increase his speed. However, Noor was still able to dodge easily, even though Gil's attacks were faster than before. Gilbert started to get annoyed because none of his attacks were hitting, but Noor was still impressed with Gilbert. Even so, Noor felt that Gilbert was still holding back his strength, so he asked Gilbert to be more serious. Gilbert was immediately angry when he heard that. This has been serious all along, Gil thought. Because he was annoyed, Gil finally used his ultimate move. Thick smoke emerged from Gil's attack, but Noor disappeared. Apparently, Noor managed to avoid the attack. Seeing Gilbert's strength, Noor immediately admitted his defeat. Noor thought, if Gilbert, who was just playing around, had that much strength, what if he was serious? He could kill me, Noor thought. Gilbert, on the other hand, thought that Noor had deliberately admitted defeat to make fun of him. Moreover, Noor said that he would wait for their next meeting. The people watching were excited because this was the first time someone had been able to avoid Gilbert's Dragon Strike skill. They reasoned that Noor didn't die because Gilbert was only using a practice spear. If it was a real spear, Noor would have died. Yeah, whatever, Noor thought. Gilbert was still troubled because his mind state was really affected. Since he was little, Gilbert was considered a genius. He had dueled all the strong people in the village and the capital, and the more he practiced, the stronger Gilbert felt. Until now, no one had been able to defeat Gilbert. In fact, Gilbert was bored because he felt he had no purpose anymore. Finally, Gil decided to become a royal soldier. Who knows, he might meet a strong person there. Over time, Gilbert continued to hunt monsters and strong people, really looking for someone who could make him excited again. One day, when Gilbert was relaxing, his teacher approached him. His teacher reprimanded Gilbert for being too relaxed in his life. Gilbert became like that because he felt that no one could compete with him. However, his teacher said that later there would definitely be someone stronger than him. Now Gilbert was confused, even though he used to be the one looking for a strong person, but now when he met him he felt confused. On the other hand, Noor admitted that Gilbert's move was truly terrifying. To avoid the move, Noor had to use physical enhancement and light steps. Oh, that's why the floor cracked, Noor thought. Noor immediately introspected himself so as not to be arrogant, because he had just faced someone stronger than him, even though Noor didn't remember his name. Damn Noor, you don't realize how great you are. Noor instead intended to train even harder. The next morning, Noor was excited and started working. He used the king's sword to clean the gutter. Luckily, no one from the kingdom saw him, or else he would have died. Thanks to the sword, Noor's work was finished quickly. In the afternoon, Noor was unemployed and didn't know what to do. The construction work was again off because his shop was closed. Because he has a new sword, Noor wants to look for another job. He wanted to be a rower, but needed a boat. Want to sell pizza, but need oven. Or maybe you can build a grill restaurant, but you need to find a place and some firepower. Oh my, the king's sword has become so despicable in Noor's hands, he thought. Suddenly, Lin appears. Noor is confused. Why is Lin here and how does he know where Noor is? It turns out, Lin asked Master Gil where Noor usually hangs out. Lin immediately said his purpose, which was to ask permission to be Noor's servant. Well, isn't it the other way around, thought Noor. It turns out, the servant Lin meant was like being his subordinate. In return, Lin asked to be taught his knowledge by Noor. Obviously Noor immediately refused. Lin kept begging to be made a disciple. For her, just being by Noor's side was enough. But Noor still refused. Lin finally offered a large reward, even she said could treat her however he wanted. But Noor still refused. Lin cried. She felt she didn't deserve to be made a disciple by Noor, so she showed how great she was by showing off all the skills she had. Actually, for a princess, Lin was really strong. But, because of that, Noor saw that Lin didn't need to be taught anymore. Noor himself couldn't even use any skills. But Lin was still insist. Finally, Noor showed the only tiny fire magic skill he had, which was once mocked by the instructor. Lin was shocked to see Noor's tiny fire magic. After that Lin finally went home. On the way, she remembered the legendary tale that had been told at her magic school before. The tale told of a young man who, despite having no talent, managed to complete 6 training schools in a short time. Even the strong kingdom's army couldn't stand to go to school there. What was even more surprising was that despite studying at 6 schools, the young man still had no special skills. Why does his story sound like someone? Lin thought. Children used to think that fairy tales were just fiction to keep them motivated to go to school. Even Lin didn't believe it at first, until Lin finally met the person. Yes, who else if not Nooru? Lin remembered that she used to study with Mr. Oken, a professor at a magic school. Oken showed his tiny fire magic that could grow bigger, but its size was still small because in reality tiny fire magic can only be made small. Even Lin could only make fire that small. But the reason Lin was so shocked when she saw Nooru's fire magic earlier was because Nooru's tiny fire was so big. It was so crazy, right? Even the tiny fire magic of Oken, a 200-year-old professor, was no match to Nooru's tiny fire. Nooru, whose intention was only to show that he could only use tiny fire magic, was misunderstood by Lin. She thought Nooru was showing off his strength. Lin, who had previously shown off her strength, became embarrassed and felt weak. No wonder I was rejected, Lin thought. But Lin didn't give up. Because in the future, Lin will lead this country with her older brother, so if she doesn't get stronger, Lin is afraid that she will only be a burden to her brother. So, she followed Nooru again. In no wasting time, Lin immediately said that she was aware of his arrogance and childishness. Lin also immediately addressed Nooru as sensei. Nooru was confused. What on earth happened with her? So it's getting more complicated, thought Nooru. In the palace, Rin was still puzzled by her father's recent decision. How could he give away the legendary sword so randomly? After all, that sword had been acquired during his adventurous days when he was still a king. It was a relic, a precious item crafted from an unknown material, far stronger than even mithril or orichalcum. People had once tried to destroy it, but all attempts failed. The value of this sword was immense. Yet, Rin's father casually handed it over to Nooru. Rin couldn't fathom what was going through her father's mind. Meanwhile, Nooru and Lin were in the city, enjoying themselves. Nooru planned to grab a meal and then head to the guild to find a mission. Lin was thrilled, even though Nooru's missions tended to be quite mundane. Lin hoped for something grand and exciting, but Nooru had other plans. Nooru worried that Lin might not want to team up with him anymore. He felt like he was burdening Lin, especially since Lin was eager for challenging missions. Nooru had asked the guild master for a joint mission, hoping to impress Lin. And they got one, defeating goblins in the nearby forest. Goblins were perfect practice opponents for adventurers, but Nooru sensed Lin's excitement. As they entered the forest, the dense trees and mist overwhelmed Nooru. Lin explained that goblins loved nuts and occasionally attacked humans for food. Nooru's insecurity grew. He felt inadequate compared to Lin's intelligence. Strangely, there were no monsters around. Lin suddenly sensed a presence ahead, but when they reached the spot, it vanished. Nooru felt something was off. And there it was, a half-eaten goblin. Lin trembled as they faced a massive creature, the supposedly weakest monster, according to legends. Nooru wondered if fear was normal. After all, he was only a rank F adventurer. But this goblin was enormous, its growls echoing through the forest. Lin's revelation left them both stunned. Lin trembled as they faced the Goblin Emperor. Nooru wondered why Lin, a rank B adventurer, seemed so afraid. Perhaps it was due to lack of experience, understandable for someone with less fight time. Nooru quickly reassured Lin that it was just a goblin, but Lin's trembling persisted. Nooru explained that this particular goblin was no ordinary creature, it surpassed even the Goblin King in strength. The Goblin Emperor was a result of genetic manipulation, an illegal experiment. Moreover, it consumed other monsters, growing stronger with each meal. Lin's confusion deepened when Nooru casually referred to it as a regular goblin. Lin's mind raced. Maybe Nooru, being a seasoned adventurer, found the Goblin Emperor easy to handle. Lin felt exasperated. Misunderstandings seemed to plague them. But then, something shifted. Lin's anxiety transformed into determination. Facing the charging goblin head-on, Nooru deftly parried its attacks. Lin, too, joined the fight, combining wind magic with her spells. Surprisingly, nothing hit the agile goblin. It retaliated by hurling tree branches at Lin, who struggled to dodge. The goblin's regeneration baffled them. It healed instantly, wounds disappearing beyond normal limits. Lin noticed something odd, a magical stone embedded in the goblin's forehead. Nooru quickly informed her that they needed to target the stone first to disrupt its regeneration. Lin complied, backing up Nooru's plan. She fired wind magic at the stone, but the goblin deftly dodged. Nooru urged Lin to use his sword instead. Its non-destructive nature would be effective. Lin hesitated but followed Nooru's advice. As Lin shot wind magic into Nooru's back, he lunged at the goblin, knocking the stone loose. The goblin writhed in pain, its regeneration halted. Now injured, the goblin remained vulnerable. Noor requested Lin's help to finish it off. Lin hesitated, fearing a painful method. Noor, however, suggested using her fire magic, the least agonizing option. Lin agreed, and the goblin finally succumbed to the flames. Despite their ordeal, both adventurers prayed for the goblin's peaceful journey to the afterlife. Their exemplary conduct impressed Rin, who believed this strange event might be connected to magical machinations within the Empire. Rain, on the other hand, trusted that Lin would emerge unscathed. Rin felt a surge of admiration as they successfully defeated the monster together. Facing the Goblin Emperor had been no easy task. Rin's curiosity grew. What else could they achieve as a team? After that, he instructed the intelligence agents to continue their investigation. Guildmaster, proud of his once inexperienced protege, couldn't believe that Rin had actually bested a goblin. The Goblin Emperor, it turned out, was far more formidable. Rin generously attributed the victory to Lin, but Lin humbly redirected the credit back to Rin. Despite this exchange, the experience was invaluable for Noor. It also revealed a surprising weakness. The goblin's vulnerability lay in the stone embedded in its forehead. Guildmaster, puzzled by this revelation, wondered why the goblin's stone was in an unconventional location. Typically, goblins had stones in their hearts or throats. Noor, ever curious, simply accepted the information. Lin, on the other hand, dutifully followed Noor's assessment that this was just an ordinary goblin. But it wasn't. It was the Goblin Emperor. In the aftermath, Master requested the right ear of the defeated goblin as proof for claiming the reward. Everyone stood dumbfounded. How had they forgotten this step? Lin, catching Noor's contagious behavior, muttered, "How foolish." Meanwhile, the goblin dead body had already turned to ash. Lin, it seemed, had caught Noor's penchant for forgetfulness. Rin, it's been incredibly stressful lately because of reading reports from his people. They reported hearing strange noises, and their livestock has been restless. This must be the work of a monster. Rin quickly realized that this was likely another sabotage, similar to the goblin incident with the Emperor yesterday. Rin immediately ordered all his subordinates to prepare for a possible attack. Right now, Rin is extremely frustrated and can't believe that the kingdom of Deridas could be so ruthless. Deridas had only wanted the labyrinth, but now it seems they intend to destroy the country. Meanwhile in the city, things seemed calm. Guildmaster showed mercy and still provided a reward for the mission. Although the payment for eliminating the goblins was minimal, Master decided to give the remaining amount to them because the mission was complete. Noor is curious about how long Lin will be stick with him. Just as Lin was about to leave, her brother Rin suddenly arrived. Instructed them to go to a city in the mountains the next morning. Rin didn't provide many details. He also said that he would cover all travel expenses and would pay Noor for this mission. He had also prepared a horse-drawn carriage that could be used and be escorted. Noor assumed this was just a simple delivery mission, so he was okay with it. The next morning, Noor was thrilled to ride in the carriage, especially since he had never experienced such luxury before. The view was stunning, and he enjoyed every moment. However, Lin seemed to be in a gloomy mood. It turned out that Lin was feeling uneasy because the mission seemed trivial. Rin had only instructed them to go to a neighboring country without any additional tasks. Lin was worried because he knew her brother was hiding something. Despite this, Ines advised Lin to stay calm, as she was there to support him. It turns out that Ines was actually given a secret mission by Rin. She was informed that the capital city would face a major crisis in the future. She is tasked with protecting Lin in the neighboring country. Lin must not return home, and Lin is still unaware of this issue. Ines feels uneasy because, as a royal soldier, she should be helping to protect the capital. However, Rin does not trust anyone other than Ines and Noor to guard Lin. Noor and the others eventually stopped to rest. Ines apologized to Noor for the trouble and explained that Noor's safety was her responsibility. Noor, however, felt that he didn't really need someone else to protect him, especially since he was confident in his own escape skills. Ines reassured Noor that he didn't need to worry about escaping because she had a protective shield. She demonstrated her magic shield, which, although thin, it was incredibly strong and indestructible. This reminded Noor of the spear-wielding opponent he had fought recently, whose name was Gilbert. Noor recalled that Gilbert was incredibly powerful, even capable of defeating a dragon on his own. Noor felt a sense of pride, knowing that he was acquainted with many strong individuals and had talents like Ines's. When talking about Ines's abilities, it turns out that when she was young, she accidentally discovered her talent. Her friends were curious about her abilities, but when they tried to touch her, they got injured. This incident left Ines deeply traumatized. Even though her friends were healed, Ines became afraid to show her talent again. Ines was eventually summoned by the 6 saints, and with hesitation, she demonstrated her abilities to them. According to Oken, Ines's talent is considered a divine gift and is extremely rare. Her abilities can be used either to attack with enough power to destroy a country or to create an indestructible shield for defense. One of the instructors, named Dandalg, became interested in Ines because of her remarkable skills. Even as a child, Ines was capable of using her shield to destroy large rocks. However, Ines continued to fear hurting others. As a result, she distanced herself from everyone. Despite this, her experiences strengthened her resolve. When she met Noor and he mentioned his name, Ines was shocked because she had heard that name before. The story goes that during a battle with insect monsters in the forest, Ines's foster father, Dandalg, came to her rescue. At that time, Dandalg murmured about wishing Noor were there. Ines recalled this because Dandalg frequently mentioned Noor's name unconsciously. Over time, Ines became envious and curious about this person because she had never truly been someone Dandalg could rely on, despite her impressive abilities. Ines developed a strong dislike for the name Noor, especially since she had not yet met him. When she eventually did meet Noor, her resentment grew due to his impolite behavior. Suddenly, Noor noticed something moving in the wheat field, where the wheat was inexplicably dying. Lin, seeing this, immediately called for a stop and used her magic skill, Uncover. It turned out there was a dragon-like monster resembling a frog accompanied by a small child standing next to it. Meanwhile, the attack on the capital city had begun. Rain quickly ordered everyone to mobilize. The king was furious with the Derrida's kingdom and was astonished by their extreme actions. Rin suspected that this was just the beginning. All the kingdom's soldiers had been deployed, and they now had to handle the situation individually. In the forest, the Goblin Emperor appeared in even greater numbers, many of whom were already injured. Fortunately, Dandalg arrived just in time and was able to protect them. Master Sig also stepped in to secure the city from the monster attacks, while Mean and his troops engaged from a distance. Oken, the Grand Master of Magic, was also present. Everyone was busy fighting off the monster invasion. Seeing the chaotic situation, Rin grew worried about his sister. Meanwhile, at Lin's location, it turned out that the child was actually controlling the frog-like monster but ended up being attacked by it. Without hesitation, Noor rushed to help the child. Using his parry skill, Noor fought against the monster. Ines commented that the child's presence there was no coincidence. She knew that the child was the one who had summoned the monster. Additionally, the monster was named the Black Death Dragon, indicating that the child was of the demon folk race. The demon folk race closely resembles humans in appearance, but they possess a unique skill that allows them to communicate with monsters. 200 years ago, they controlled ferocious monsters and nearly destroyed nations. Because of this, the demon folk were hunted to near extinction. However, Rin suspects that some demons might have survived and are now harboring deep grudges against humans. It is now clear that the child Noor helped is a demon, as the dragon's natural habitat is in the swamps and it wouldn't have appeared here by chance. It's likely that the child intended to bring the dragon to the capital. Ines was baffled by Noor's decision to help an enemy like this and considered it incredibly reckless. Ines was extremely frustrated, realizing that the person Dandalg had praised was actually so foolish. Noor, still fighting the dragon that resembled a frog, was naive and continued to struggle against it. When Lin tried to assist Noor, Ines immediately stopped her, warning that it was too dangerous to approach the dragon. This is why the dragon is called the Black Death Dragon. It can release toxic breath that affects all living beings. As the dragon prepared to attack again, Ines created a barrier with her shield. She explained to Lin that inhaling the toxin from the dragon would have fatal consequences, and even the strongest saint healers would find it difficult to cure. Ines told Lin that Noor was beyond saving, and sure enough, the monster unleashed another toxic breath. Ines quickly reinforced the barrier to make it completely impenetrable. Lin used her purify skill, but it had no effect. Even birds fell from the sky, succumbing to the dragon's poisonous breath. Feeling guilty for Noor's dire condition, Ines remained focused on ensuring Lin's safety. Suddenly, dragon claws appeared and the toxic smoke began to dissipate. To their surprise, Noor was still alive and continued fighting the dragon despite his shattered condition. Noor stood and fought to protect others, which deeply shocked Ines. She remembered her master's words about a true protector being one who safeguards others even at the cost of their own life. Noor was hit by another attack from the dragon, and though he attempted to fight back, the poison had taken its toll. Eventually, he collapsed but still managed to say that he could continue fighting. In the story, we're shown the past of a young demon child. We see children from the demon race who are imprisoned, often referred to as cursed children. These children are raised in an extremely harsh and inhumane manner. The way they are fed is worse than how livestock is treated, and they are continuously tortured because their ancestors once controlled a monster to attack humans. One of these children, named Rollo, frequently endures severe abuse from the prison guards. It's heartbreaking to witness because, despite being of the demon race, these children are innocent and unaware of their situation. Rollo, in particular, is often put on display before the public to be mocked and ridiculed. Over time, Rollo develops the ability to read the hearts and minds of those around him. When people realize that Rollo has this power, they treat him even more cruelly. However, despite all the mistreatment, Rollo harbors no resentment or anger towards them. Rollo only desired peace. One day, he was given a mission to deliver a monster to the capital. If he accepted and succeeded, the other demon children would be freed and allowed to eat as much as they wanted, and they would no longer be tortured. However, if Rollo refused, they would be treated even worse than before. Although Rollo was terrified, especially since he couldn't read minds due to a magical device on his head, he decided to trust the person's words and accept the mission. During the journey, Rollo encountered Nora's group. When Lynn destroyed the barrier, the monster Rollo was controlling broke free, and Rollo was attacked by the frog monster he was transporting. Despite the failed mission, Rollo had no regrets. He felt relieved that he could finally die peacefully and escape his suffering. Rollo only hoped that if he were reincarnated, he could live a peaceful life without being beaten again. Just as Rollo had resigned himself to his fate, Nora suddenly appeared to save him. Rollo was stunned as he watched Nora fight the frog monster. When the frog spewed poison, Nora cast a healing spell on Rollo, making Rollo feel truly protected. Nora tanked all of the frog's poison and attacks, ensuring that neither he nor Rollo were harmed until Nora finally collapsed. Rollo was confused and didn't know what to do, but then he noticed that Nora seemed unfazed, as if he could still endure the situation. What did Nora mean by that? Let's flash back to Nora's childhood. When Nora was young, he often went into the forest to find food. Anything that looked edible, he would bring back home, cook it, and eat it. However, one day, after eating something he had cooked, he suddenly started vomiting blood. In his fading consciousness, Nora quickly used a low-level healing spell, which fortunately saved his life. Although he was still weak and in pain, Nora began searching for information about the plant he had eaten the night before. After that, Nora discovered that he had consumed a dragon slayer mushroom, and it was a miracle that he still survived. However, the poison was already in his system, and there was nothing more he could do about it. All Nora knew was that he had to continue with his training despite the poison running through his veins. Nora couldn't afford to miss a single day of training. No matter how close to death he might feel, Nora must keep studying and training. However, as soon as Nora struck a wooden post twice, his body collapsed again, and he started vomiting. All he could do was use his healing spell until he woke up in bed, no longer feeling any pain. He only felt hungry, so he went back to the forest to gather food. Now, Nora knew he had to be careful and not just pick random plants. But this time, he got bitten by a poisonous snake on his butt, causing him to faint and be poisoned again. When Nora woke up, he didn't feel any pain at all. He felt perfectly fine. He even brought the snake back home and ate it, expecting it to taste strange, but to his surprise, it was delicious. Moreover, Nora didn't experience any symptoms of poisoning. It seemed like his body had become immune to poison. So, the next day, Nora decided to test this theory by intentionally getting bitten by the same snake. Sure enough, the poison didn't spread or affect him at all. Nora became energized, thinking, maybe I can acquire a new skill. Since then, he began deliberately eating poisonous animals and plants. Even though he sometimes vomited a bit of blood, it didn't seem to affect him much. However, despite his efforts, Nora still hadn't gained any new skills. It felt like Nora was being tested and challenged. Back to the fight, Nora felt healthy. His body had started to adapt to the frog's poison. He thought, this poisonous frog must taste really good if I eat it. Curious and eager to try its flavor, Nora decided to give it a go. Someone then remarked, wait, Why are you getting careless, Noor? Meanwhile, the frog began to rage again, launching all its attacks, but Noor blocked them flawlessly. Rollo was amazed as he watched Noor eventually deflect the frog's attack, even managing to bite its tongue in the process. Enraged, the frog prepared to unleash its ultimate poison, but before it could spray at Noor, it was struck down first. The frog exploded in its mouth and was defeated. The crowd watching was stunned. Noor really pulled off something incredible. Noor then checked to make sure Rollo was okay. Struggling to speak, Rollo tried to explain that Noor had misunderstood. Rollo confessed that he was the one who brought the monster there, and their goal was to reach the city. Upon hearing this, Noor thought the frog was meant to be sold in the city as food, assuming it was some kind of valuable livestock that Rollo was protecting with illusion magic to prevent it from being stolen. Feeling guilty for killing the frog, Noor quickly apologized to Rollo and even offered to compensate him. Rollo, at a loss for what to do, found himself confused by Noor's behavior. Noor then became curious about how Rollo had managed to control the frog. Rollo explained that he could control monsters because he was from the demon race. Noor got excited, imagining how useful such a skill would be. He thought about how it could make farming easier by getting animals to help or by using birds to send messages. Rollo was surprised. This was the first time he had met someone as kind as Noor, or rather, someone as naive. Shortly after, Lin and Ines caught up with Noor. Lin immediately wanted to heal Noor, but he assured them he was perfectly fine, no injuries or poison effects at all. Lin and Ines were astonished at how Noor had resisted such a deadly poison. Lin started to suspect that Noor had reached a high level of strength, thinking his rigorous training had blessed him with a Holy Spirit's protection. This made Lin respect Noor even more since, in Lin's experience, reaching that level typically required 40 years of training, yet Noor had achieved it at such a young age. Noor then asked Lin to check on Rollo. Lin, who had been skeptical at first, noticed up close that Rollo was clearly a demon child. Noor even suggested that they bring Rollo along in their carriage. Ines was immediately opposed, questioning why they would help a demon, who should be an enemy. Noor, however, felt bad for Rollo because he had disrupted Rollo's mission to deliver the monster. Lin and Ines were baffled by Noor's reasoning, finding it hard to believe someone could be so dense. Curious about who had ordered Rollo to deliver the monster, they questioned him further, but Rollo didn't know. He explained that he had been blindfolded when he was sent, so he didn't even know the way back. Upon further investigation, they realized Rollo was telling the truth and even bore a mark indicating he was a slave. In the Kingdom of Clay, slavery was illegal, but it was still common in other countries. Noor then requested that they take Rollo to the nearest town. Lin was torn because, despite the prejudices against the demon race, Rollo seemed harmless, just an ordinary, innocent child. Lin asked Ines for permission to bring Rollo along with them, but Ines was still reluctant, arguing that Rollo was still a demon. Furthermore, their current situation was tricky. Mitras, the holy city they were heading to, strictly prohibited the entry of demons. Leaving Rollo behind, however, would surely cause him even more trouble. As Lin was deep in thought, suddenly, a voice called out. A strange man, fully armed, appeared out of nowhere. Confused, they wondered how he had survived the poison and what he wanted, as he began rambling about the dead plague frog. The man muttered about things that were not as expected. Noor asked if he was the one who told Rollo to bring the frog monster. But the man said that he was just a messenger. He also asked if Noor killed the frog monster. Noor apologized if he was the one who killed the monster. The man also wondered why Noor even apologized to him. He only had business with Rollo. Noor, who heard that, suddenly attacked by the man. Lucky he managed to fend off the mysterious man's attack. The man again asked Noor not to stop him from bringing Rollo because he could get a lot of money from a demon folk. He attacked Noor again, saying that he should not stop him from bringing the child. However, the man's attack was able to be repelled by Noor. Lin, who saw that, was confused because the man suddenly attacked Noor. The fight continued with the man's launch continuous attacks, but Noor was still able to fend him off. Feeling annoyed, the man began to get serious about attacking Noor. The next attack was able to make Noor bounce back, even though he managed to repel it. Noor was surprised by the power of the attack from a small knife that the man used. On the other hand, the knife used to attack Noor was destroyed, which made the man also feel surprised by that. The attack continued even faster. The man tried to defeat Noor. Noor, who could only fend off the attack, began to think that if he continued to be attacked he would be in danger later. He also could not focus because he had to protect Luro. The man's attack intensified against Noor, whose aura can even be felt around them, which makes people around them unable to get close. Ines again took out his shield to protect Lin. Ines also thought that he knew the figure of the man, who was none other than Deadman Sadu, who was a former S-rank adventurer. Here we are shown a flashback where there was a meeting between the 6 sovereign discussing the unsolved case. The masters also suggested to avoid Sadu because it was so dangerous. Gilbert, who was curious about who this Deadman Sadu was then explained by Oken further. Oken also explained that Sadu is a very talented person. Even at a young age he was able to master dwarf alchemy, which is ancient art, and earned the nickname of Dragon Slayer. His reputation spread to all corners of the country. But that's why he started accepting jobs, including taking lives. On the other hand, he also contributed a lot to the guild because he was able to complete disaster category missions alone. Sadu accepted all the missions that given for money, one of which is destroying a country, including taking the lives of the country's royal family. So far no one has ever been able to defeat Sadu, so the guild announced to the public that he was dead, so as not to cause panic. Continuing to the battle between Noor and Sadu, it turns out that Sadu's precious knife was destroyed by the defensive strength of Noor's sword. However, his knife was made of a material greater than mithril. Sadu then released his mainstay technique, the Silver Cross, which can kill in an instant. Noor was also hurt by the attack because he had to protect Luro. Ines, who saw that, started to help Noor. Both of them faced Sadu, who continued to attack. Noor also had idea to face Sadu's attack. By throwing the claws from the frog monster he faced before, he was able to make Sadu's silver cross start to slowly disintegrate. But suddenly from the opposite direction Sadu started to enter the defense made by Ines and attack her. But luckily Noor quickly repelled the attack. Again Sadu was surprised to see Noor, who successfully repelled it and made his weapon destroyed. Feeling curious, he attacked Noor again with a surprise attack. Noor also said that it was useless because he could repel his attack. Because his weapon started, Sadu was destroyed and started to stop his attack. Sadu also explained that there will be a festival that will be held in the city. The curious Ines asked more, but Sadu only explained that the festival that will happen will be very lively. Before leaving, Sadu also said that Noor was the strangest person he ever fought. He gave another surprise attack, but Noor was still able to repel it. He said if Luro was lucky, Noor protected him. After that he disappeared in black smoke. Feeling curious about the festival that Sadu said, they decided to go back to the capital city, but Luro said that a big black dragon monster was on his way there. Lin rushed to tell them to go back to the capital city. Lin also said that he already knew his brother's plan. On the way, Lin started to worry about the threat of a black dragon that would attack the city. Meanwhile, in the capital city, Rin's guards told him that all the citizens had been evacuated out of the city. Even the Sovereign Six had also prepared to face the attack that would happen. Rin wonder where the next attack will come from. The guard says that there are no visible signs of monsters from the sky. Rin, who is curious, suddenly sees something moving in the clouds. He also takes out the uncover skill to the sky. Suddenly a large black dragon appears. Rin, who saw the size of the dragon, immediately knew that the black dragon was called the Dragon of Calamity. The scene begins showing little Noor reading a book about a dragon slayer who killed dragons and gained wealth for the country attacked by the dragon. Little Noor was very interested in becoming a dragon hunter. His father also said that it was not that easy to defeat a dragon. Back to in the present, Noor and his friends are on their way to the capital. He feels something which turns out to be a calamity dragon. The dragon that entered the capital began to attack, which panicked the people who were fleeing. Rin immediately ordered the soldiers to evacuate the remaining residents. On the other hand, the masters were busy with the undead and monster beasts who started attacking simultaneously. In the palace, the king ordered Gilbert to continue protecting the residents and said he had other things to do. Outside the city, Lin felt desperate imagining the dragon's attack. Even his father, who was a king, would not be able to fight a dragon that big. Meanwhile, Noor looked relaxed and asked if Lin's father and brother were in the city. Noor said that if he had the idea to immediately help them. Lin, who felt confused, followed the instructions given by Noor. On the other hand, the king began to prepare to face the dragon himself. He also began to remember memories of when little Lin was playing with him. In his heart, the king asked sorry if he can't be a good king for his people, but there is one thing he can do for his people. When things got serious, Ines started making cylinders from the skill shield she had. He also told Noor to stand in front of the cylinder he made. Lin then cast several spells that would be used to throw Noor so he could quickly get to the city. Noor felt that this was not the magic that Lin used when fighting the Goblin King with him. Before he had time to ask further, Noor was blown away by Lin's wind blast magic. The king who was facing the black dragon began to prepare to receive its attack. Rin, who saw the dragon, trembled imagining the attack that the dragon would release. The king, who began to realize that he would not survive, began to use his signature move. This move has tremendous power, but the owner's life will be lost. A fight was inevitable when the black dragon and the king started to attack each other. Noor suddenly appeared and hit the black dragon. Everyone was shocked to see that. The black dragon who received the attack earlier was quite shocked. He thought who had knocked him down earlier. He also felt that he didn't accept it because dragons have the principle that the strong will rule the weak. The dragon started to go on a rampage attacking Noor, but as usual Noor used the parry skill to repel the dragon's attack. Here we are shown the moment before Noor hits the black dragon, where it turns out that Lin's wind blast magic is able to make Noor run very fast through the city wall and immediately finds the black dragon who is facing the king. Noor feels that he will collide with the black dragon soon. Uses his sword to attack the dragon. Because of the combination of magic from Ines and Lin, Noor is able to attack the black dragon and help the king in time. Ines and Lin immediately entered the city riding horses together with Loro, but pieces of debris started hitting them. Fortunately, Ines immediately took out her shield skill to protect them. They were immediately greeted by King Ogre's group. Lin, who realized this, thought that the King Ogre has a relatively small body when compared to the King Ogre he once fought. However, his strength cannot be underestimated. He also remembers that when fighting with Noor, he should not panic and face it calmly. Because compared to Noor who faced a black dragon, the Goblin Emperor was still nothing. Ines was shocked to hear this. The goblin started to attack, but at that time Rollo ordered the goblin to stop and not move. Seeing this, Lin immediately cast ice magic which froze the goblin, followed by Ines entering combat mode by changing her shield into a sword and slashing the goblin. Lin was amazed by Ines' strength. He also thinks that Rollo also has extraordinary powers as a demon folk. The fight continued between Noor and the black dragon where Noor managed to parry the black dragon who wanted to step on him. The dragon couldn't stop thinking about the parry attack which could slowly injure him. On the other hand, Noor was amazed again by the sword he used, because after using it in order to survive the dragon's attacks, the sword did not suffer the slightest scratch. The black dragon, who was starting to get desperate, began to use his signature move which he was sure no one would be able to block, but unexpectedly Noor was still able to block it and direct the attack at above the sky. Loro felt that the dragon was very angry because Noor didn't think he was serious about facing him. The dragon also thought that the strong one here was not himself but Noor. Noor's next attack managed to break part of the black dragon's body. The black dragon that was before was very angry suddenly became calmer after being defeated by Noor. Noor suddenly remembered his father's words in the past where a dragon slayer was able to bring wealth from the results of battles and was nicknamed the Dragon Slayer. Noor, who felt tired of the battle, was immediately approached by Lin. The city was saved thanks to Noor. Noor's adventure episodes will continue. Thank you for watching and don't forget to subscribe.